Peter Gray from the AU Review in Australia. Hello, Christopher.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. I was lucky enough to speak to you for Freaky all those years ago, and I briefly mentioned how we were hoping that it was a Happy Death Day 3. So it's like quite nice to know that that's moving forward as far as we know.
Yeah, I know. I'm very excited, relieved, all the things.
Well, you have an immediate fan built in for that one, so I'm very excited.
Amazing. Thank you.
Looking at drop, like when you're looking at some of the setups in Chris and Gillian's script and the way you have to maneuver the action, like was there a specific part that you thought was going to be the most difficult to film, and ultimately like was it, or did you sort of there was another aspect that surprised you along the way?
I think I've been doing this long enough now to identify the problem children as it was. For the most part, I would say, I knew technically where it was going to be challenging, and we were very prepared for it. There was
Mm,
one scene in particular, which I won't name, but there was a scene where it was like it felt like everything was off.
mm,
It was the writing felt a little off, and the performances felt a little off, and we were rushed, and it was somebody's first day, and all of it. And so about halfway through that particular scene, I called our line producer over, and I was like, "This sucks," and I literally whispered in his ear, "We're reshooting it," and so we stopped and kind of just moved on with the rest of the day, and then I went back and worked on the scene, and we went. It was only a few days later we reshot that scene, and it was right. It's just
I
sometimes
mean,
you
well,
have to know where something is just not clicking.
yeah, well, going off that, like, were there any moments that, Megan or Brandon, like what they interpreted in the scene surprised you, or did it reshape anything for you?
I don't think anything was surprising, but I was sometimes floored by the depth of
Mm,
emotion. There's one scene in particular between the two of them that's it's really the centerpiece. It's the emotional centerpiece of the movie, um, where Violet is revealing herself in a really, really vulnerable and personal way, and she's
mm,
weirdly doing it to distract him and disarm him a little bit. But then the surprise in the moment is that he comes back with his own truth and his own
mm.
story that they share. And and both of them, those performances are so amazing. But I remember really watching Megan and just being so moved by her, and knowing that she was feeling all those things that she was saying. And it's a really powerful moment.
I mean, it's awesome seeing her sort of get like her, leading lady moment where she sort of had all these like supporting roles in television, and now we're like, yeah, like I was
A
like,
thousand
you,
percent.
you watch her and you're just like, this is where you're meant to be, like you're meant to be leading films. Like she's just got this like energy about her. It's always so awesome to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the big joys of making this movie, is really feeling like, yeah, that this is like the moment where she becomes a big movie star as she should.
Mm. And then I always find like in your films, there's always like there's always been like an element of playfulness to them, and like obviously this is more of a thriller than the horror that you've dabbled in. But like, do you find like that incorporation of comedy or levity, like it's easy to balance with darker material, or do you find that's a very sort of easy thing for you to sort of push them together?
I think it's easy for me in the sense that like I feel like I have a particular instinct for it, and
Mm,
I know when it feels appropriate and when it doesn't. You know what I mean? And obviously, Drop is a different movie from things like Freaky and Happy Death Day because those are horror comedies, and
mm,
Drop is very much a more of a classic thriller.
mm,
But it still doesn't mean that there aren't appropriate moments of levity, even in
mm,
the darkest of moments, because that's life, and especially when you have a character like in Drop who's so designed to be that comedic relief and that disruption, because he's always barreling into the scene, and just being who he is. Um, it makes it it makes it work because it's very germane to the setting and to the situation, as opposed to like our characters, like Violet and Henry, cracking jokes at inappropriate
Mm,
moments and things like that take you out of the movie.
mm.
So yeah, it's really just all about calibration, and knowing when it's appropriate and when it's not.
Yeah. No, I was quite surprised. Like, like I watched the trailer for this, and then even watching the film, I was completely taken aback by the the how, who, and why behind it. Like, I was not expecting that at all. So that was really nice to sort of watch a film and not know where it was going. Like, that's always so exciting to me, because it feels like it's hard to surprise audiences now. So when it was revealed, I was like, wow, I was not looking at that, which was always fun. But
That's
like,
great.
with when you're like, as when you're approaching someone else's script, like, is there this sort of balance for you of like, I've got to maintain their vision, but I also want to like reshape it to what I sort of think as well? Like, do you find like that's a difficult thing to take on someone else's work?
Not at all. And because I think it starts immediately with it's not an us or me versus them or kind of a thing. It's an
Yeah.
us. Like we're all on the same team, and our collective goal is to make the best movie possible and tell the
Mm,
best story possible. And so when I got Chris and Jill's script, I was so immediately taken by how well written it was, an
mm,
amazing concept, an amazing central character, some wonderful supporting characters as well. But I was also, because I'm a writer, I was able
mm,
to identify a lot of other things that I thought we could change or augment or improve or whatever the case may be. And so I got to work really closely with them on the script. And it was so nice because we all did it without any sense of ego. Like,
mm.
everything was the best idea wins. And that happened again and again where like I would be like, hey, let's try this instead, let's do this. And then they would write it, but then suddenly they would surprise me with something that we hadn't even discussed that made it even better. And so it was just a really seamless process in terms of just like pushing toward the best version of the movie that we could find.
I mean, there's what all the ideas here work together. Like, it was kind of masterful to see how it sort of started off with, seeing what Violet went through to the date, to reveals of everything, to obviously the massive set piece of the window. Like, it was just
Yeah.
everything was so worked so well. Like the fact that it's like a 90 minutes, it's packed tight, it's like it
Tight 90. We love a
doesn't
tight
have any fat
90.
on it. We love it. But like, and one of the things that I really love was like there were some one shots and some like really interesting camera work with like, were they something that you envisioned when you were reading the script, or did they develop more spontaneously as you were putting the scene together?
It's all of the above. All of the above. There were
Mm,
certain shots that were very specific in my head that I would either ask the writers to incorporate into the script just so that I
mm,
could hang on to them. I often keep my own sort of little list of shots and things that I want to incorporate along the way. And then
mm.
of course I start to work with my DP with Mark Spicer, who's an Australian, and Mark and I just have this really wonderful relationship, and he has brilliant ideas, and he surprises me with amazing shots that I never thought of as well. And so it's just that constant open collaboration. We find, I would say, 90% of the shots when he and I just sit down together and we
Mm.
go scene by scene, and we just figure that out, and we create our shot lists and our little mud maps and everything. And by the time we get to set, everything is kind of ready to go, and everybody knows what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, as I said, like, it was just everything worked together so well. Like, sort of like elevated this high concept, and like, I'm gonna say, as a gay man, having Brandon's cleaner in there, like, I didn't hate that at all. I was like, that man's voice can do things to me. So I was like, very, very well, very much appreciate
Well, it's funny
that.
that you mentioned that. No, but seriously, when we were casting, and obviously we had Megan first, and everybody had a different idea about
Yeah.
who Henry should be, but I didn't. And I said that he is it's sort of an inversion of the trope of like the damsel in distress, because he's the
Mm,
damsel in distress, and
mm,
typically the damsel is very beautiful.
Mm.
And so I
Well,
was like, I think there should be a wish fulfillment element. Now, that's not to say like I wanted a great actor and I didn't
yeah.
think that those had to be mutually exclusive, but I thought the wish fulfillment aspect of the movie was going on a date with Brandon.
I mean, it worked. It
And
all
only
worked.
and only us gay men could recognize that, or a female director.
No, yeah, yeah. I was like, I like this work. So no, but
Yeah.
thank you so much. I'm such a fan of everything you do. I'm very much looking forward to Happy Death Day 3, and I hope Drop just absolutely kills it. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.